Here's a fun fact. The church doesn't know what day it is today, and we don't agree with ourselves about what day it is. We, here, and I think probably with a little bit of help from our iPhones this morning, can agree that it is indeed Sunday, January 4th, 2026. It's a new year. We know it's still the season of Christmas, and we also know we're somewhere in the 12 days of Christmas, but here's where the agreement ends. Today is either the 10th or the 11th day of Christmas, depending on where you are. It's either Lord's a-leaping or Piper's piping, both of which sound a bit more festive than I would personally care for this morning, but depending on which branch of the Christian family you claim as home, or where you live geographically, you might not agree with the person sitting next to you when it comes to the great heavenly banquet where we all count days differently. The problem, like most thorny problems, is one of grammar. Specifically, this is a prepositional vagueness in our vernacular of English. This is why we should all be speaking French, a language that is far more precise in both geometry of sentence structure and logic. English is neither. Then comes the Protestant Reformation, to absolutely no help to anybody on the English-speaking Isles, makes this even more complicated. And I'm going to say something I don't often say, which is Shakespeare makes this problem bigger for all of us. I'm going to say more about him in a moment, but he's part of the problem. The question at hand is whether this is the 10th or the 11th day of Christmas, which anyone who can count to 12 should be able to answer, provided we all agreed on what the 25th of December was, and on which preposition we use for this season. The song I quoted earlier says there are 12 days of Christmas. Your bulletin cover says there are 12 days of Christmas, so I'm leading with playing my hand. And on this, most Christians agree that there are 12 days of Christmas. The problem is, what's Christmas Day? Is the 25th of December the first day of Christmas? Some say yes. And thus we count from there to here, and today is day 11. Or is the 25th of December a separate day, a holy day, a Christmas day, and the count begins on the 26th, the first day after Christmas, which makes this only day 10, which handily gets us to Tuesday's day 12, which somehow or another we all agree that January 6th is the 12th day of Christmas, but if you count from the 25th, it's actually the 13th. But none of us ever do this, because nobody has this time, and we don't ever think of this. This is angels dancing on the head of the pin stuff that doesn't really mean anything to us. But trust me when I can say that there are many disciples over the centuries who have spent many sleepless nights and far too much ink debating this case. And I'll admit right here that I've never really given this a second thought until this year. But on Christmas Day this year, I woke up sicker than sick with absolutely zero voice, no energy, and none of the promises of Christmas Day feeling very true at all. I found myself with some time on my hands. I might have been out of bed for all of 3 hours on Christmas Day, primarily for dog walking duties and other non-negotiables. I didn't speak to a soul all day. I didn't have a voice. I physically couldn't. The 26th, I found myself only slightly better, and I might have been awake for a good 5 or 6 hours that day. I managed to whisper a Merry Christmas down the phone to my family and was able to get myself and the dogs into our matching Christmas pajamas, a set of which was already being worn by Patrick as we had given him a do not open until Christmas Day package that he carried with him to visit his mother in Arizona. By the 27th, I was still no good for the world, but was well enough for my mind to start racing with that familiar but so unpleasant mix of anxiety and depression that my particular brain chemistry kicks in whenever I'm very ill. Thanks, brain. I was doing fine without that. And on the 28th, I came to church. I had lunch with Marilyn, and I managed to stay awake until all of 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You were the last people I saw on December 24th. And 4 days later, on the 28th, you in this church were the next people I saw, and you were such a blessing. I started writing about Thursday's New Year's Day on Monday or Tuesday of last week, trying to stay ahead of myself, and that's when I learned that I didn't know how to count. Or on what to count. Or what I was going to say without one of you saying, Will, it's actually the wrong day, you've got the numbers wrong. I mentioned earlier that Shakespeare is of little help to our modern counting problem of days of or after Christmas. And as someone who goes to the Bard nearly as often as I go to Scripture, I take this as a personal betrayal. I hadn't considered it before. And Shakespeare's contribution to this great English count-off is the play Twelfth Night, a play that many of us know is in reference to the 12th night of Christmas. It's what's written for the 12th night of Christmas merriment. But we all know that in faith-based communities, nights are a very different matter than days. And whether you start counting the day with the morning's light or the first stars of the previous evening's light, you find yourself in a sticky wicket. Here on the Upper West Side, we know to give a wide berth to any of our Jewish siblings in the fairway shopping aisles when we suddenly realizing that Passover starting on Tuesday means Monday night. We know that we count the days differently. Shakespeare was counting from the night of the 25th, which handily gets us to the night of the 6th, but doesn't take all of the 25th into account, and we still have this is it of or is it after, which Shakespeare avoids the problem and doesn't give us any solutions to the all, just calling it the 12th night. No prepositions whatsoever. The French, again, is better. And this is always the problem. Such simple-looking things like counting to 12 that are so much more complicated when we dig down and start looking at what's really going on. And maybe this is where Christmas comes in through the back door. In the Gospel of John that Michael read for us this morning, we hear that from Christ's fullness, the fullness of Christ. Now, this is the Gospel of John hinting at what its project will be over its next chapters. That in the Gospel of John, Jesus is fully God and fully human right from the start. There is no manger, there's no birth, there's just the one who was with us from the beginning, fully God, who is suddenly on the scene as fully human. Fully God, fully human, right from the start. And from this fullness, the 14th verse says, we are all receiving grace upon grace. Now here's another grammar problem that I have. Saying grace upon grace is rather like saying something is very unique. It isn't. It's either unique or it's not. Grace, by definition, is ever multiplying. The definition of grace is the very imagination of God that is never ending, always abundant, ever present, omni-available, forever and ever and ever and ever. Grace is uniquely generative. It is not very uniquely generative, it is uniquely generative. And this grace that is always more, is described in the Gospel of John as part of that fullness of Christ as grace upon grace. This is more than addition. This is more than multiplication. Grace upon grace is taking us to the exponential. It's taking us to the infinite, to where God dwells. And in the Gospel of John, God fully dwells in each of us. Through the fullness of Christ, we receive grace upon grace. Eternity upon eternity. Never ending without ending. Forgiveness upon forgiveness. Love upon love. These are things that compound themselves and confuse us. This year, I woke up on Christmas Day to nothing of what I expected, nor none of what I wanted. And you'll forgive me as I confess that yes, the thought did cross my mind that afternoon, is this Christmas at all? I'm a lousy patient, and my sickbed can get pretty bleak. It's best to leave me in the dog's care and just push the bone broth into my room with a long stick. Don't try to talk to me. Christmas didn't arrive this year as grace for me. It didn't arrive as grace upon grace. It arrived rather poorly. And it certainly didn't come as the grace upon grace or the miracle that we'd been talking about all through Advent. But the more I thought, and the more I sat, or laid, and the more I stewed and ruminated, and the more I thought about Christmas, the more I thought, poor Christmas. We do heap so much expectation onto a single day in December, don't we? We think it's going to burst through and change everything with just a morning light, and it does. And sometimes it takes us a little while to catch up. But yet we sing every Christmas Eve, the hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight. But what if they aren't? What if we can't feel that? What if we wake up still afraid? What if we wake up still hoping? What if we wake up and the world hasn't changed to the degree that we prayed, or that we needed, or that we longed for? What if Christmas comes as a betrayal? What's it all for? And why didn't Christmas come, said little Sally Lou Who. These are real questions that real people, including me, have asked and have wrestled and have debated as we've counted lords, pipers, and drummers all approaching here this grand finale. And aside from the never-ending nature of grace, one other thing I know about it is that grace is the single biggest fan of truth. Truth is, of course, the nature of our confession. Truth is the nature of honesty, of the fullness of self and of self-awareness, of the owning up to and the examining of what we have done, what we have said, what we have left undone, and what we have left unsaid. Without shame, without pushing it under the carpet, but taking stock, really hard adult work of taking stock. When we can say our truth as fully full as we are ourselves, as fully full as Christ is Christ's self, well, then grace comes stammering through the door. And it comes not just as grace. It comes as grace upon grace, grace upon grace. Sometimes it doesn't come very loudly, and it might take us a few moments, and it comes quietly at first. It whispers in with laryngitis to the preacher, and then it starts knocking, and the knocking gets louder and louder. And when you still say, no, I'm not ready to get out of bed yet, it comes even louder, and suddenly a multitude of angels is there with it, and they're singing. And grace upon grace keeps coming, and eventually, sometimes, maybe within those 12 days of Christmas, maybe not until later, it's going to beat the door down. It's going to beat the door down, but it's not going to come in a way that you will recognize it. Grace upon grace, day of day, day after day of Christmas. Well, it grows and grows, just as a little child born in a manger grows and grows into the man and the teacher that we follow, who grows and grows into the Christ who saves. This is where grace upon grace gets interesting. Christmas Day upon Christmas Day. And whether it's the 10th or the 11th day of whatever it is you started counting last night or this morning, May this 11 o'clock hour simply be better than yesterday's 11 o'clock hour, and may all the coming days, as indeed our Northern Hemisphere calendar promises, be filled with more light. More light. Light upon light. Grace upon grace. Christmas Day upon Christmas Day. Grace upon grace. And light upon light.